Hello, everyone. Have you ever noticed how if you walk up to somebody that you know really well and you and each other see each other and you jump at each other and say, hello, it's great to see you. It's a little bit different from getting an email from that same person with the word hello in the tagline. There's something different about saying hello to somebody in person versus on a computer or in text. And there's a very good reason for that. See, the word hello really is just a vehicle to convey emotional content. And what's interesting is that in communication, there's more than just what you say to convey emotional connection. There's the word, the actual content of what it is, the meaning of the words you say, whether they're written or verbal. Those are there, and that actually only makes up about 7% of the total emotional connection. The other 93% are made up of your vocal variety, which is 38%, and your body language, which is 55%. You can walk up to somebody and say absolutely nothing at all, no voice, no inflection, and communicate with them just through face expressions, through posture. You can even communicate to yourself with just posture. So when you look at an email, you're only working with 7% of the total bandwidth for communication and emotional connection. This makes online communication really challenging because most of what we use online is text, whether it's in a GitHub comment or whether it's emails back and forth or whether it's tasks and whether it's Slack or however you're using to communicate. The vast majority of our communication that we use on a day-to-day basis is text only. But communication needs connection. You need an emotional connection with people in order to level up your actual engagement. Connection is what turns a group of individuals into a team. It's what makes a group of individuals into a family. People that have actual buy-in. If you're a team leader and you want your members of your team to give 110%, they need to feel like they belong, that they are connected to the team. And if you're just throwing tasks at them, they're not going to be able to do that. There's a distance there that they will feel connected to their environment and be distracted by things they're doing around them more than with the tasks that they are working for and getting paid for, because those things around them are present and they have emotional connection. But we need to emotionally connect with each other via communication online. It's an imperative, particularly nowadays, because remote communication and remote work is taking over the world. It needs to happen. There is no way that I can connect with somebody over in Taiwan, where Christine and Johnson, the other team members here are at, and or Lauren, who's down in California, and I'm up here in Washington. We're all over the world. But we have to be able to connect in order for this to actually work, for us to be able to collaborate and work together. So the answer isn't just simply adding in remote conferences like this one, where, yes, you can see me. We can sort of kind of make eye contact. We can see each other's faces. We can hear each other's voices. But if you really think about it, compared to being in person, connecting via video conference is, no matter how good the platform is kind of like trying to eat ice cream with sock on your tongue. It's not all that pleasant sometimes. There's a lot of issues. There's technical issues. There's lag. There's the fact that you can't look at the camera and look at the person at the same time. This reduces eye contact. And people have proven in studies that just one tiny bit of contact being off actually creeps people out more than actually connecting with them. You need to be able to connect with more than just the words you say, though. You need to level up your communication in a way that leverages the communication you have to have a better effect. This is the challenge we're facing. We have a limited palette to work with. So what we need to do in order to be able to be effective in our communication is to become more skilled with the palette we have. We need to make our communication more intentional, more active, more focused, and more informed. In order for us to be productive to our fullest potential, we need to be able to prioritize communication modes that allow for greater expressiveness and engagement. But we also need to intentionally train and practice active listening and communicating in a way that optimizes the connection that we have. We're all like blind men, and we're learning to have better hearing so that we can compensate for lacking sight. We need to be better communicators with the communication that we have. And we do that through intentional, active listening and communicating. Now, we would love if everybody spoke the same language. And as soon as you said something, the meaning and intent of what you wanted to get across was immediately received perfectly by the other side. That never happens, ever. No matter how good of a communicator you are, the other person is never going to receive the exact same message that you intended to convey 100% with all of the connotations that you wanted to convey and all of the context that's behind what you're wanting to communicate. We can also be really bad and convey the opposite of our intent, what our intended meaning, by being really bad at communicating, or they may be really poor listeners and mess it up even more. So there's a lot of room for growth, but we're never going to reach 100%. That's because we all speak different languages. I mean, right now, I'm speaking in English, and you guys are listening in English, hopefully. But there's more to communication than just, the words in the dictionary and the grammar. There's connotations. If I've lived in Ireland for a time, I've been to Northern Ireland, I've been to Canada, but I've also never been to places like Australia, though I've known people from there. And there's a lot of idioms that will confuse people like crazy if you don't understand the context that they're intending. But there's also deeper differences communication-wise that you need to learn to overcome. And that is the emotional language that your listener or the speaker that you're listening to is using. You see, we all have particular communication traits that we use. We have certain personality patterns that we are accustomed to, that we use when we're filtering and interpreting what people say. It's typically unconscious. We don't think about it, but it happens all the time. You cannot turn it off. You can only change the mode you're using to one degree or other. You're always going to be filtering what you hear through some kind of lens. And if you are speaking to somebody who's using a different lens than what you are expecting them to, they will receive a completely different intent and completely different emotion than what you were intending, and you will fail at connecting with them. This leads to disaster. What we need to do is learn how people think. We need to learn how to recognize how a particular person thinks and how we think and adjust the two so that they line up. It's like two different computers talking over an API. You need to have them speaking the same language and match up the inputs and the outputs in order for it to work. Period, 100%, otherwise you're going to get errors. We need to use these psychological tools because that's what they are. They're tools in order to be able to communicate efficiently and effectively. We're all different. We all have different preferences for the ways that we approach things. We all have different filters, and that's totally good. That's actually really good because that lends diversity and robustness to our economy and to our world. We can't only use just one filter, but we need to be able to switch things around in order to be able to adapt to communicate effectively. One of these patterns, one of these psychological tools that we have is personality. Now, some people might think that personality is a part of your identity. You might think that personality is who you are at your core. That's not true. You can go on to Facebook and you can take all these different tests and quizzes. You can find different things. You can learn what your Hogwarts house is. You can learn what your true spirit animal is, or all these different kinds of fun things. And to some degree or other, they might be more or less accurate in how they represent you. There's also different personality tests that you can take that are really zeroed in, fine-tuned, like the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator test. Or you can take the Big Five test that psychologists use that measure a bunch of different things like neuroticism and change adaptation and things like that. These are all different measurements of labels that we apply to ourselves at any given time. But the thing is, they're not who we are. Everyone has all of the personalities inside of ourselves to one degree or other. Just like skills. I may not be really good at riding a bike, but I can do it. So I have that skill. I'm a little bit worse at fighting with a sword, but I can kind of whack one around a little bit. I can cook better than both of those things. Everybody can cook a little bit, even if it's just burning water. But everybody has certain fundamental personality skills inside of them, even if they're untrained. Everybody has a certain amount of empathy. Everyone has a certain amount of extroversion in certain circumstances. Everybody has a certain amount of introversion inside of them to a certain degree. And we use those at different times for different circumstances, and we use them in various degrees of familiarity. We might be really good at being extroverted. We might be really good. What that means is that we're really good at drawing energy from being around people. It's a skill. We can also be really good at drawing energy from being alone in solitude. And we can train both of those skills. The thing is, not one is better than the other. We need to use the one that's appropriate for the situation that we're in. And we need to recognize that other people are going to be more skilled at certain personality skills than others. So we need to learn our own strengths and weaknesses in our personality to help us to know where we need to develop our communication and listening skills because they're weaker. And we can learn to double down on our strengths and really excel in a particular area. Try and be more balanced. It's a strategic approach, just like developing a skill in programming or in development in any aspect, any skill. You want to prioritize and learn and develop those skills. But you also want to learn them so that you can recognize what particular situation is going to call for one particular kind and know how to switch those out. If you identify with them and stick with them, you're not going to be able to grow and learn and adapt to situations. So I'm going to talk about, there's a lot of different things you can go into with this. You can do a lot of research and study and dig deep into personality. But today I'm going to talk about the 4 temperaments that have kind of transcended time. These have been around since before Aristotle. These have been recognized and talked about and analyzed for literally millennia. They're a common pattern of ways that we sort people. And what's interesting is, as I mentioned, there is no concrete grouping where if you're stuck in this particular group, you're stuck there for your life, like a Hogwarts house. You get sorted once and you're stuck there. It's not like that in real life. We can adjust, we can change, we can develop other skills. And so these are simply mindset modes that people tend to use. These are the ways that you are accustomed to thinking. And there are certain skills and advantages and disadvantages that line up with each of them. So I'm going to talk about each one of them, some of the ways they've been analyzed in history, talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses of each one, but it's just an overview. I want you to go through and dig into yourself, think about them, recognize when it's true, when it's not true, and when it should be true and when it should not be true. And then think about your coworkers. Think about the people you've talked with and try and figure out what their patterns are. Some of you might have taken the test before you joined on here, so you have a little bit of a graph, an idea where you can slot yourself in, but you notice it's a percentage. It's not always only one thing. I mean, I'm primarily a Ravenclaw, if you know what that means. I have some Slytherin tendencies. I got some Hufflepuff tendencies. I've got some Gryffindor tendencies, but I'm primarily Ravenclaw. I'm a nerd. I love thinking about things, and my primary drive is curiosity. And I'll get to why that is later on. I'm going to outline this particular pattern based along a particular pattern of two-factor models of personality. You can look it up on Wikipedia, two-factor models of personality. You'll find a whole huge chart. It's hilarious because it's all kinds of contradictory and it's hilarious to look at. But what this particular one I'm looking at is going to correlate is extroversion versus introversion and task focus versus relation focus. So you have tasks focused on one side, relation focused on the other, and you have introversion on one side, extroversion on the other. So you have 4 different quadrants you can work with that. And I'm going to correlate those with the 4 classical elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. And talk about how those correlate with them. Just kind of like a label to make it handy to talk about. The first one I'm going to talk about is the one that is my wife. Earth. Earth has been known by many names throughout history. They're known as the melancholic type. They're known as analytical, also known as the perfect country because they want everything to be perfect. They're a hard type skill person. They don't really work with soft skills very easily. They have a natural advantage when dealing with tasks and what they're working with their hands, very concrete, practical, down to earth. And their primary concern, the one thing they really care about, is getting it right. They love rule books. They love manuals. They love writing rule books and love writing manuals. And they love checking everybody else by them. They're really good at quality control because of that. They can sometimes come across as wanting to be in control and telling everybody what to do. But that's not actually really what their fundamental goal is. And they can be offended if you think that is. They care about things happening properly by their standards, regardless of who's in control. That's their fundamental goal and their fundamental interest. They're really good at putting the brakes on things until things are just so. They want to make sure that thing doesn't hit production until things are proper. So they're really good people to have as your PR review people. They're also really good at making sure that you actually have reasons for your ideas. They want sources and they want justifications and facts for everything. Just the facts, man. Give me the facts. That's what they want. They don't want you to get by with hunches or half-formed ideas, which for me, I'll get to the wind type later, is difficult. Here's why it's good that I'm married to an earth type. Keeps me balanced. I call her, she's my kite. The kite, she's the string to my kite. Otherwise I go flying off everywhere or I crash. I need it. They hate and they are threatened by change. They're the greatest sticks in the mud you'll ever see, particularly if you aren't showing respect to their concerns. But you cannot, under any circumstances, and I underline this, don't throw something new at them and only expect them to adapt to it and deal with it in only a few days or a few hours. Good heavens. Give them time to process it. They think things through and they avoid change. So you have to give them time to adapt. I'm going to give you an example character. I have 4 different characters for each of these ones that I want you guys to think about as an example. And some of you nerds might, debate me on some of these assignations, but we can discuss that later in the socializing period afterwards. A good example, I think, in the Marvel comic universe, if you're familiar, of an Earth-type person is Captain America. He's all about his code of honor, things being done right. And it doesn't matter if he has to fight the entire system. Things must be right in order for him to sign off on it. And he'll fight to the death for that. There's a lot of key words that Earth people really resonate with, and if you want to motivate them, inspire them, and connect with them emotionally, these are words that even in an email will leap out, connect with them, and really pack a punch. If you use words that connect with your own type that don't really resonate with their particular personality type, it's not going to connect with them. Use the words that work for them. Use and prioritize the prioritizations that matter to them. So some key words that matter for Earth types are perfect, right, standard, tradition, reasons, giving reasons for what you're doing, proper, they're all about propriety, correct, analyze. On the negative side, they never want things to be out of order. So you say something is out of order, or they call things that is out of order, they're going to freak out about that. So you want to connect with that one. If you're looking at an email, I'll also give kind of an outline of what an email looks like for each of these types. If you look at an email from an Earth type, it's proper letter formatting with an opening, a body, and a signature. And they'll be the same one on every email, unless it's particular categories. Sometimes they subcategorize their templates for particular uses. And they'll have like little places where you can put in like a variable where they'll put in like, hello, name, insert meaningless phrase of condolences here, move on to this part, and then here's the task is the important part, and then down the signature, hello, have a good day, and all that kind of stuff. They've put in niceties out of obligation because it's supposed to be there, not because they mean it. They just want to get to the core of what's going on, and it's formulaic. And sometimes it will seem a little bit forced, but understand that's how they think. The goal in their email is to get the facts out there and to communicate and to get it done right. There's always going to be details for the requirements of what you want to be done from an Earth person, and you need that. Next one I'm going to talk about is the fire type, or the choleric type, also known as hypomanic, or the control country. These are also hard skill people. They can be either abstract or concrete. They can go kind of either way. What they really care about is getting things done. They're on top of things, literally. They'll be on top of the command chain and make sure things are happening. They are driven by success, by accomplishment, and they tend to push people out of the way if they aren't motivated aligned with their ambition. It just kind of happens. And they don't really prioritize other people's feelings. They don't really, not because they don't care about you. Sometimes they do. They just don't see the emotional impact of what they're doing typically. It's difficult for them to prioritize people. And sometimes that's really, really important, because as I show with the next one, if you pay too much attention to just the people, things get bogged down and nothing ever happens. Sometimes the task needs to be king. And in those kinds of situations, when you need to push a project through or make a project happen at all, you need a fire person on top to make it happen. They're invaluable. And I'll tell a story about that later on. Their pride is what's easily damaged. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. They need to be valued and they need to be respected. And everything is a competition for them. So in dealing with them, if you interpret what they're saying as a competition and you engage with them in a competitive way, they will never back down and they won't be able to learn a thing. You can't work with them in that context. You have to calm down, give them their head, let them work, and then you can work with them rather than against them. That's the best way I've discovered for working with fire type people. A great example of fire type in the context of the Marvel Universe is Nick Fury, the original founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. He was on top of things. He was a type A personality who took charge and made sure that all the superheroes were staying in line. You need that. If they're going every which direction, doing their own thing, you need to coordinate them, work them together, and make them focus on one thing. And that is what a fire person is for. Some key words for fire people is control, success, accomplish, Goals, they're all about goals. They're all about power and gaining power, adding value. They're all about winning and taking action. They're very high velocity type people. You get an email from a fire type, it's typically going to be short, it's going to be to the point. It's not going to mess around with frivolities. They're geared on tasks, accomplishments, due dates. This needs to happen by here. Then what can you do for me? Next up, water. Water is a soft skill. We just talked about 2 hard skill type people. This is a soft skill person. People that are really good with empathy and working with people. They prioritize peace. They prioritize harmony. They synergize and empathize instinctively, even online. And it can seem like they're not getting very much done because they're spending all their time socializing, but it's valuable. It's important for them to connect with people. Otherwise, they're not going to feel engaged and motivated. One of their failings is frequently being codependent. They'll give, and they can turn themselves into a doormat, which is really sad. Or they can be pushed until they snap, typically because you hurt somebody that they care about rather than them themselves. The rage of a water type is terrifying. You do not want to push them to their limits. These guys are, I think, one of the most important types out of the 4 because they keep the other ones from killing each other. It's really important to have a water type on your team because otherwise the fire types can be trumping all over the earth type and the wind types can be running off another direction and be annoying the crap out of everybody else. So you need to have a water type to calm everybody down. They're like the conscience of a team, keeping a feel on the flow of the emotions around them. And they are gold in an online team. They deeply crave respect and recognition, though, but they never ask for it. It doesn't feel right to them. You have to give it to them. Otherwise, they're going to feel pushed down, pushed off to the side. Now, the example character for water type is going to surprise you, I think. I believe that Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, is an ideal example for a water type. Remember, he had to deal with the monster. He went off and meditated, calmed himself, and he's all about running away from conflict. He's all about trying to control his emotions and connect with people. He's a very soft-hearted individual. He's just a big bear inside there. But if you push him, he blows up and he's the Hulk. And I think that it's important to remember that when you're dealing with a water type, just because they seem like a wet noodle, they're not. You need to respect their boundaries and help them set them because they typically won't themselves, and then they'll be stressed out and blow up. This is one of the key failings and key strengths of the water type. Some keywords for water types are peace, love, harmony, relax, calm, things that are soothing. They want to adjust to things as opposed to the earth people who are all about not having change. They want things to stay the same. Water people are about adjusting to what's going on around them. They're all about connecting with people. They value mutuality, consensus, bipartisan connections. Those are their priorities. The problem is when you have everything based on consensus, nothing ever actually happens. You need to have somebody, fire type, to come in, make the final decision, and push forward. Otherwise, sometimes the water people are just going to slow everything down along with the earth people. An email from a water person takes forever to get to the point because it's focused on how your vacation went and how your family's doing and how your pets are doing and how all these other different things are going. And then at the last minute, in the last bit of the email, they'll mention, oh, by the way, I'm sorry to have to bring it up, but would you mind please doing this one thing for me? If it's no bother at all, at your own convenience, even if the deadline was yesterday. You really have to really focus on catching what they really need because they're not going to lay it out in hammer and tongs fashion with this is what I need to happen. Here's what needs to happen by when. I'm not going to do that. Almost every request they ever make is going to be phrased in a form of an apology. The last one. Best for last, because this is me. Wind. I am a wind person, and I love it. My secondary is water, though, which is important. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get along with anybody, and everybody would be driven nuts by me. The wind type is another soft skill person. We're energized by people and opportunities. Opportunities are huge for us. We come up with lots of ideas. We love to start projects, whether or not we have the skills or expertise to back them up sometimes. You wouldn't believe how many different ideas I come up with that never get off the ground because I probably should have researched how much work that actually was going to involve. Thankfully, coding was one of the ones that actually I was able to back up and put the work in over time, because we have a hard time sticking to things. It's a big challenge that we have. And I have to be perfectly honest, it is one of the biggest struggles I've had in my working career, particularly with online remote work, is starting a project and finishing it, pushing through all the way to the end. I love jumping into a new project, learning all the new ins and outs of it, exploring all the new things, being curious, asking questions, connecting with people. But when it gets down to the drudgery of actually doing it, I get bored really fast. And that's a common thing for wind people. We tend to get very overwhelmed very quickly because of this. It's hard for us to keep up with monotony of keeping with systems to track our tasks and our productivity. So I have dozens of productivity apps and things set up in order to track all the different things. Only a couple of them have actually been using consistently because I lose track of things really quickly. I lose track of things to keep track of things. We just get distracted. It's easy. Our desks are a mess because we tend to thrive on the creativity of the chaos and disorganization. We love it. We make connections between vastly diverse arrays of data points, and we see patterns that other people miss because we think abstractly as opposed to earth types who tend to be more concrete, which makes communication with my wife challenging because she wants concrete literal things and I want about this metaphor and that simile, and she has no clue what I'm talking about. You need to work to understand, to communicate with people in their language, and that's something that we've learned a lot of in our marriage. If you try and over-organize and constrain us, though, it can kill our energy and joy, and that's our core value for our team, is adding that energy into the mix. So you have to find that balance of outlining things, reminding us, helping us to remember deadlines and to plan margin into things without constraining us so much that we can't actually engage with things in a creative way. My example character here is Tony Stark, Iron Man. He's all about creating new things, jumping on new crazy ideas. He's all about the big explosions and the flare and being because we love attention. That's just a thing that we do. It's part of Toastmasters. So I love being there and engaging with people and just doing new things, learning new stuff, and really allowing my curiosity and my creativity to engage with people. I just love it. It's one of the reasons why I love Code Mentor, which is related with ARC, because I'm able to connect with people more than with computers and coach them into developing their skills better. Keywords for wind types are fun. We're also known as the fun country. Creative, where ideas, wonder, curious, what if, exciting, happy, opportunity, very, super, and all those big type words. Impossible, we love to jump for the impossible. I'll also make sure I mention we're the sanguine type if you're looking at the chart. If you're looking at an email from us, if you get an email, it'll be late. And when we have a long email, it's full of questions. There'll be brainstorms, a bunch of different ideas, no one clear direction. There'll be a bunch of different directions for you to take the pick of because we have a hard time making choices. So we'll give you a bunch of options and let you pick a particular one. And it'll typically cover multiple topics because we can't focus. It's not something that we do very well. And so they'll have a lot of stuff there all mixed together. And somewhere in there will be, oh, by the way, there's this one deadline thing that I need something to help with and so on. And you have to kind of dig through all the mess to find it. So those are the 4 personality types. You have the fire, as I mentioned, the choleric type. We have the phlegmatic type, which is the water type. We have the first one, the melancholic type, which is the earth type. And that last one, the wind type, is the sanguine type. So you can look at the chart and there's a few more details there, and you can look them up more on the internet to dig more into them in detail. And we can discuss it more afterwards. But The real thing I want to fundamentally get across is that we can find ourselves in these, but we don't want to identify with them. See, I strongly empathize and react well with the wind type, but secondarily, I'm an earth. Tertiarily, I'm water. Tertiarily, I'm earth, and then at the far end, I'm choleric or fire. And I can work with all of those depending on the situation. I can recognize that I'm talking to my wife and I need to draw from my concrete mind in order to communicate with her. And when she works with me, when she's listening, sometimes she says, oh, he's brainstorming. He's not actually making a concrete plan. Here's what he's talking about, and I can interpret it in this abstract way. There's one story I want to bring up that kind of shows how this can work in a real situation, particularly remotely online. I was working for a team in Tokyo. I was here in Washington. They were in Tokyo. And only one of the guys on the team spoke English. One of the guys kind of half write English. So some of his GitHub comments were actually in English. I had to use Google Translate for the rest or ask for help from the other guy who I was working more closely with. We were the only front-end guys on the team. And he and I spoke English. He spoke Japanese to some degree. And so there was kind of this bottleneck of communication through him to communicate with everybody else. So it was about the worst world you could possibly get in for making connection with the team online. This was compounded by the fact that both myself and the other guy were wind-water types. He was slightly stronger on the water than I was, which I noticed because he was constantly saying thank you and I'm sorry with almost every request he made. He was very, very connected with trying to be as ingratiating and helpful as possible in that way, which was fun. It was easygoing. We had tons of fun chatting about anime and all these different ideas, and we talked about all kinds of fun stuff. But what's interesting is that the rest of the team were all Japanese, and you notice that countries tend to be adapted more towards certain personality types than others as well, and Japanese tend to be more earth-water. And so they were all about having things working, functional, that kind of stuff, and making sure there's consensus on things and having everything working properly and going by the book and all this kind of stuff. And so you'll notice that out of all of us, there was not a single fire type. And we had a lot of water and a bunch of earth. And while my friend and I were jumping around having all these different ideas and things like that, we couldn't really implement them because we were relying on our project manager to approve things, that kind of stuff. So our ideas were having a bit of a hard time making headway, and nothing was really getting decided on anything on the project. Everything was taking forever. And I realized that it was because there weren't any fire types. And so what I had to do, because even though I was subcontracted out to help with one particular member on the team who was not the leader, so I was not in a leadership position, and I had very little influence and very little connection with the rest of the team, I had to draw from the skill sets that I studied in being able to channel a fire type and ask questions that would trigger that kind of a response from people, to ask about deadlines, step outside of my comfort zone of the fact that I like to have random ideas and I like to have freedom to explore them, and I don't like deadlines, but I had to ask for them. I had to challenge myself to engage with them in a way that focused on setting deadlines and pushing things forward and asking concrete, actionable questions rather than just possibility questions, which are very different. And that was able to actually pass those questions along. He was able to communicate with the other ones and get back answers, and we were actually able to move forward because I didn't stay within my particular personality, which is why I always say these are tools. These are not identities. I grew up highly extroverted in a very introverted family. I learned how to be an introvert and how to draw energy from being in solitude. So I'm now an ambivert. I can draw from both wells, which I think is in general better in some ways, but in other ways I also get tired from both sides, so I have to balance it out. These are skills that we learn. No one is 100% exclusive to one type. We pull from them in various contexts and various situations. If you see a lot of high tension rising in your team and people are butting heads over who's got control over what, or who's meeting what are goals being met and who's responsible for particular things, or are particular standards being met, and you're not seeing anybody calming things down and reminding people of their common goal, you might need to draw from water type and start asking questions and reminding people, and just chat, engage with people in a social way like a water person would, in order to calm people down and remember that these are people, not just words, because it's really easy to forget that online. We don't have a lot of ways to actually connect people and give each other hugs, which can solve a multitude of communications sometimes. But we really need to be aware of where we're at and balance our team among the temperaments. We need to see and acknowledge these differences as complementary rather than detrimental. See how we fit together like puzzle pieces rather than just grinding gears in opposite directions. These differences are value-adding opportunities if they're mined. If they're not, if they're ignored, they become pit traps. They're sinkholes of lost productivity. If we're using that 7% of communication that's available to us just to say words that aren't going to measure and fit in with the priorities of the other side, we're wasting not only our words, but our time and our emotional investment. You need to use the words that work with the people. You need to use the concepts that are valued by the other people. You need to show them the respect in a way that they're going to recognize it. If you do that, you can actually embrace the differences, grow from them, and have a team that acts like a family that can weather difficulties. Instead of being brittle and breaking at the first opportunity, you can grow and strengthen through adversity. So this, I think, is the heart and soul of remote communication. Using that 7% to its highest potential by communicating to the other person in a language that they value and respect. Thank you.